My name is Princess Larissa, and I'm begging you not to look away from this story, because what I'm about to tell you will break your heart and then put it back together in a way that changes everything you think you know about survival. Stay with me until the very last word, please. Because the truth I reveal at the end isn't what you expect, and it might just save your life or the life of someone you love. I promise you, every word matters. They threw me into a pit filled with snakes on my 21st birthday, and my own father gave the order. Let me say that again so you understand. My father, the man who was supposed to protect me, who held me as a baby, who watched me grow up, looked me in the eyes and decided I deserved to die screaming in the darkness, surrounded by venom and terror and absolute despair. And the reason? The only reason? I said no. I was Princess Larissa bint Abdullah Al Saud, born into Saudi royalty, raised in a palace with 63 rooms where I was allowed to exist in only 7 of them. My mother killed herself when I was 9, swallowed a bottle of pills rather than endure one more day of my father's cruelty, and I found her body cold and still on the bathroom floor. After she died, I became invisible, a beautiful ornament my father planned to trade for business connections and political power. I lived in a golden cage, and I never questioned it, because I didn't know anything else existed beyond those walls. But I read everything I could find, and books showed me other worlds, other possibilities. I fell in love with medicine, with the idea of healing people, of having a purpose beyond being silent and obedient and pretty. I started sneaking into the servant quarters to help when people got sick, and I was good at it, naturally talented in a way that made my soul sing, like I'd finally found the reason God put me on this earth. When I turned 20, my father told me he'd arranged my marriage to a man 43 years older than me, a business associate with a reputation for cruelty that even the palace servants whispered about in terrified voices. His previous wives had died under mysterious circumstances. Everyone knew he was a monster. My father didn't care. I looked at that marriage contract on my father's desk, and something inside me just broke. Maybe it was my mother's spirit finally reaching me. Maybe I'd simply hit the limit of what a human soul can endure before it has to choose between submission and self-destruction. I told my father very quietly, very calmly, "No, I won't marry him. I want to study medicine. I want to help people. I want a life that means something." The silence that followed was terrifying. Then my father stood up, walked to me, and slapped me so hard I tasted blood. His voice was ice when he said, "You're not my daughter anymore. You're nothing." 3 days later, men in masks came for me at 3 a.m. They bound my hands, gagged me, threw a hood over my head, and drove me into the desert for hours. When they finally stopped and removed the hood, I saw it. A hole in the ground, perfectly circular, descending into darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. One of them shined a flashlight down, and I saw them. Hundreds of snakes writhing at the bottom, a living carpet of scales and death waiting 98 feet below. I begged, "God forgive me. I degraded myself. I promised anything, everything, if they'd just let me live." They watched with dead eyes, completely unmoved. Then one of them spoke. "Your father says a daughter who disobeys is worse than a dead daughter." And they pushed me. I remember falling through darkness, certain I was about to die, and then the impact that shattered my left leg and cracked my ribs and knocked all the air from my lungs. I landed directly on the snakes, and they attacked immediately, biting again and again, pumping venom into my body from 10, 15, 20 different bites. The pain was beyond anything I have words for. I screamed until my voice destroyed itself, until I could only make animal sounds that didn't seem human anymore. I should have died. Every doctor I've told this story to says I should have died within minutes from the venom alone. Never mind the trauma, the broken bones, the shock. But I didn't die. The snakes stopped attacking after those first terrible minutes, and something impossible happened. They left me alone. I learned later I'd landed in a hibernation pit where certain desert snake species gather during extreme heat to enter torpor, and my body temperature dropping from shock somehow signaled to them that I wasn't a threat. They treated me like part of their environment, just another cold object in their shelter. But knowing that didn't help the pain. Didn't help the thirst that started within hours, my tongue swelling in my mouth, my lips cracking and bleeding. Didn't help the absolute certainty that even if the snakes left me alone, I was going to die slowly of dehydration or infection in this underground tomb. The first night lasted forever. I drifted in and out of consciousness, seeing my mother's face in the darkness above me, hearing her voice telling me to hold on. My broken leg was screaming agony with every heartbeat. My ribs made breathing and exercise in torture, and the venom was doing things to my body I didn't understand, making my heart race irregularly, my vision blur, my skin burn like I was on fire from the inside. When dawn came and light filtered down, I could finally see my prison clearly. The walls were sheer rock, impossible to climb even if I'd been healthy. The snakes were everywhere, 300 at least, coiled together in slow-breathing masses. I recognized some species from my reading: vipers, cobras, and one massive black snake that might have been a mamba, one of the most venomous serpents on Earth. The thirst became unbearable on the second day. I hallucinated water everywhere, reaching for pools that dissolved into sand and snake scales. I knew I had maybe one more day before dehydration killed me, and I started praying for death to come quickly instead of dragging out my suffering. Then it rained, a brief desert storm on the third day, and I tilted my face up and caught drops in my mouth like they were falling straight from heaven's mercy. I dragged myself to depressions in the rock where water was pooling, ignoring the screaming protests of my shattered leg, and I drank muddy water mixed with snake waste and sand, and it was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted because it was life itself. That rain saved me, but also cursed me to a longer death, because now I had enough water to survive for weeks instead of dying quickly, and I'd have time to feel every moment of my slow starvation and suffering. My leg infection started on the fourth day. That sickly sweet smell of rotting flesh, fever making me shake with chills despite brutal daytime heat. I knew if I didn't set the bone, the infection would spread and kill me with sepsis. But I had nothing. No tools, no supplies, just rocks and desperation. I found 2 pieces of dry wood and tore strips from my dress. Then I did something I still can't believe I survived. I set my own broken leg. I bit down on cloth so hard I cracked my teeth. I felt along the break with trembling fingers, then pulled and aligned the bone fragments while pain turned my vision white. I splinted it and tied the wood so tight my foot went numb, and then I passed out completely. When I woke up, the pain had become a constant grinding ache, but the splint was holding. The fever broke on the 8th day. Somehow, impossibly, my body won a battle it had no right to win. I started eating insects. Beetles and ants and small spiders, bitter and wrong but containing protein and moisture I desperately needed. I learned to move glacially slow so I wouldn't disturb the snakes. I learned their patterns, when they were active, when they were dormant. I collected morning dew on fabric, wringing out drops of moisture I rationed like liquid gold. But the loneliness was destroying me. Humans aren't meant to be alone. Isolation breaks us in invisible ways. I started talking to myself constantly, having elaborate conversations where I played both parts. I talked to my mother's ghost, to God, to the snakes themselves. I sang every song I'd ever learned, recited poetry and Quran verses, told myself stories just to hear a human voice, even if it was my own hoarse whisper. On the 15th day, I tried to climb out. My leg had healed enough to bear weight, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I could claw my way to freedom. I made it 12 feet up before my strength gave out, and I fell, landing hard enough to re-break 2 ribs. I lay there after that fall and cried without tears because I was too dehydrated to produce them. Something inside me broke that wasn't bone or tissue. It was hope shattering into pieces as sharp as the rocks cutting into my back. For 2 days I wanted to die. I actively wanted it. I considered provoking the snakes into killing me quickly. I composed final messages in my head to people who wouldn't care I was gone. I made peace with simply stopping, with ending the struggle that seemed so pointless. But I didn't do it. And the reason is going to sound absurd, but I swear it's true. I didn't kill myself because of a beetle. I was lying there in despair when this small black beetle crawled across my hand. It was missing 2 legs, its shell cracked and damaged, probably from a snake's failed attack. But it kept moving, kept struggling forward on its 4 remaining legs, refusing to surrender to its injuries. I watched this broken insect cross my hand with such determination, and I thought, if this beetle with its tiny brain and broken body can fight for life, who am I to quit? I have intelligence, knowledge, the ability to learn and adapt. If this crippled beetle can keep trying, then so can I. That beetle saved my life more surely than any rope or rescue team. I started being systematic about survival. I created a water collection system, mapped the pit identifying safe zones, exercised my uninjured limbs, cleaned my wounds religiously, rationed my insect food. I stayed human by preserving my mind when everything else had been stripped away. The weeks blurred together. 30 days, 40, 47. My body changed dramatically. I lost 50 pounds, my muscles wasting until every bone showed through darkened, toughened skin. My hair became a matted tangle I cut short with a sharp rock. I looked nothing like Princess Larissa anymore. I looked feral, ancient, like something that belonged in that pit with the snakes. But my mind stayed clear. That was the miracle. Despite starvation and trauma and isolation, my thoughts remained sharp. I recited medical knowledge and poetry, designed buildings in my imagination, diagnosed my own conditions. I stayed human. On day 47, I heard voices. Real voices, speaking Arabic in a dialect I didn't recognize. I tried to call out, but my voice was destroyed. So I found a rock and hit it against the wall in a rhythm, a pattern, a desperate signal. The voices stopped. Footsteps. Then a face appeared at the rim, silhouetted against sky so bright I could barely look. A shout of alarm. More faces. An older man with kind eyes called down, "Hold on, sister. We will get you out." They were Bedouin herders whose goats had wandered near the pit. They didn't have rope long enough at first. They had to travel 2 days for equipment, leaving people behind to reassure me, to lower water in a container. That clean water was the most delicious thing I've ever tasted. When they pulled me up 2 days later, sunlight blinded me. Fresh air made me dizzy. Solid ground felt like it was moving. An older woman named Fatima began nursing me back to health with infinite patience, cleaning my wounds properly for the first time in weeks, feeding me tiny amounts of broth, letting me cry real tears, holding me while I sobbed out 7 weeks of accumulated trauma. I didn't tell them who I was. I was terrified my father would find me and finish what he'd started. I said I was just Larissa, kidnapped by criminals, with no family. They asked no questions, just helped. I stayed with them for 4 months while I healed. Fatima taught me practical skills: cooking, sewing, animal care. Her husband Khalid taught me Quran as poetry and wisdom. Their children treated me like family. For the first time in my life, I understood what family could mean when it wasn't about power or control. But I knew I couldn't stay forever. One night I told Fatima enough truth that she understood I needed to disappear completely. She asked no questions. Her husband took me to contacts who specialized in helping people vanish. I obtained new documents, new identity, passage on a cargo ship to East Africa. When we docked in Mombasa, I disappeared into crowds and began building a life from nothing. I worked as a cleaner, then translator, saving every penny. I enrolled in nursing school under my new name, finally pursuing the medical knowledge I'd dreamed about. I graduated top of my class, began working in a rural clinic, delivering babies, setting bones, diagnosing diseases. I was good at it. My own suffering had given me deep empathy that most people never develop. Years passed. 5, 10, 15, 23. I built a life with meaning and purpose. Friendships. A small apartment filled with books and plants and light. Everything absent from my palace prison in that terrible pit. My father died 7 years ago. I saw his obituary online with glowing tributes to his charitable works and devotion to family. I felt nothing. He was buried with honors while I remained erased, invisible, a ghost who'd never officially been born. I'm telling you this story now because I'm dying. Cancer, aggressive and spreading too fast. 6 months, maybe a year. I'm not afraid of death anymore. When you've spent 47 days convinced you're dying, actual death loses its terror. But I am afraid of disappearing completely, of dying as someone else while Princess Larissa remains nothing but a scratched-out line in a registry somewhere. I'm telling this story because there are other women in cages. Maybe not literal snake pits, but cages of control and abuse and silencing. Women whose families treat them as property, whose voices are suppressed, whose dreams are crushed. If my story can reach even one of those women and show her that survival is possible, that life beyond the cage exists and is worth fighting for, then every moment of my suffering will have had purpose. I'm telling this story because truth matters. The people who threw me in that pit believed they could erase me without consequence. They were right. They faced no consequences. But I can still speak. I can still say, this happened, and the world should know. Here's what I learned in that pit. The lessons I need you to understand. Your body can endure far more than your mind believes possible. Hope is not a feeling but a choice you make every single day. Silence protects abusers, and speaking up is the only way to break cycles of violence. But here's the real truth. The thing I promised you at the beginning. The reason I survived wasn't the snake's torpor, wasn't luck, wasn't even my will to live, though all those mattered. The real reason I survived is that I'd already been in a pit my entire life before they threw me in that hole. I'd already been surrounded by dangers I couldn't see clearly. Already been trapped and controlled and poisoned by small doses of cruelty every single day. The snake pit was just the same prison made visible, made physical, made undeniable. I survived it because I'd been training for it my whole life without knowing it. Every day of obedience and silence and swallowed rage had been preparation for those 47 days. When the real test came, I already knew how to endure what seemed unendurable because I'd been doing it since I was 9 years old. The cage you're in right now, whatever it is, whether it's a relationship, or a job, or a family, or a situation that feels impossible to escape, that cage is teaching you survival skills you don't even know you're learning. It's making you stronger in ways you can't see yet. When the moment comes, when you finally decide that you'd rather die trying to escape than live one more day in captivity, you'll discover that the strength was always there, that you've been building it every single day you've endured what felt unendurable. My name is Princess Larissa bint Abdullah Al Saud. I was thrown into a pit of snakes at age 21 because I said no. I survived 47 days through will and luck and the strange mercy of torpid serpents. I built a life from nothing, became a nurse, helped thousands of patients. I learned that you can survive what seems unsurvivable if you keep going one moment at a time. Whatever pit you're in, literal or metaphorical, you have the strength to survive it. You just have to choose survival one moment at a time, one small decision at a time, one tiny victory at a time, until you find yourself standing in sunlight again. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for witnessing my truth. Thank you for allowing Princess Larissa to exist again after decades of erasure. Your attention is a form of resurrection. You've given me the gift of being seen and heard and acknowledged as a full human being with a story worth telling. And that's all anyone really wants in the end. To be seen, to be heard, to matter. You've given me that. So thank you, truly, from the bottom of whatever heart I have left after everything that's tried to break it.